So then, as a parent, now that you know ADHD and you know that it's a more profound and a more impairing disorder than we once thought, what can you do? I want you to take 3 roles, and you can read about these in my book, Taking Charge of ADHD. The first role every parent should play is to become a scientific parent, which means make yourself an expert. I want you knowing as much as the professionals know. So you should be reading widely, because truth is an assembled thing. It doesn't come from a single website or source. It comes from integrating across those and seeing the reliable information that keeps showing up across the various sources that you're reading. So whether you go to chad.org or add.org or caddick.org or the other websites, read, learn, become an expert, know as much as you can. Just like a family of a diabetic child needs to know diabetes inside and out if they're going to appropriately cope with and compensate for that child's diabetes. And then, just like a scientist, you are going to have to experiment. There are hundreds of things that you can do, but they don't all work for every child. So we have to test, revise. Try it. Does it work? If it doesn't, let's move on to something else. So there's a test, revise process about raising an ADHD child. You're not going to get it perfect out of the gate. And what worked for one parent may not work for your child. And somebody may be on Concerta, but your child's going to need Adderall or Vyvanse or Strattera. And the same dose that worked for one may not work for the other. It is a process of experimenting and letting your child show you which of these things may work for them. So be a experimenter. I tell that because parents come in and they try the token system and it didn't work, and they try timeout, and expecting that the first thing out of the gate is going to be successful, and it isn't always so. You got to keep trying. And then I want you to become very skeptical. There is a lot of junk knowledge out there, especially on the internet. You type ADHD into Google, which I did this morning, 14 million replies. There is no way a parent can search that for the diamond in the dung heap. So I want you to become very skeptical. If you are not hearing this information reliably across different sources, it probably isn't true. And if it sounds too good to be true, just like financial planning, it probably is, right? So be careful out there. There are magnetic mattresses, there's copper bracelets, there's ginkgo biloba, there's omega-3 6s, there's antioxidants like pycnogenol. There is so much junk out there. There's a clinic in Las Vegas that will diagnose your whole family and give you chips to spend at the casino. Maybe that works. I don't know, right? But you get the point, all right? There is so much trash out there that it's hard to sort it out. So that's why you really need to have your skeptic hat on whenever you're reading anything. And you're looking for reliable information across sources. And then you will filter out the gems. The next role, you need to become an executive parent. You need to stop whining, suck it up, man up, and own this disorder in this child. This is the hardest thing for families to do. They learn about it, they read it, but they don't necessarily own it. There is this sort of, if you will, reticence that they have internally that I see from time to time, where they always hold out this hope that there's some silver bullet out there, usually on the internet, that if they just tried that, all the problems would be solved, we could give this up, he'd be normal, and let's get on with life. Right? And I wish there was the silver bullet, but there isn't. So we tell this to ADHD adults as well. It's one thing to know ADHD. It's another thing to own your ADHD and to make it a part of who you are. It's not all of who you are. You may be a gifted artist. You may be a comedian. You may be a scientist. You may be a physician. None of that has to do with ADHD. ADHD predisposes to no gift. But you do have other gifts and other talents at what you are good at. So I want you to embrace ADHD as part of who you are, but not all of who you are. ADHD is a small set of traits out of the more than 400 that you were blessed with. So you may be good at lots of other things. Let's find those other things, because they're going to have to compensate for what your ADHD is dragging down. But don't ever attribute those other successful enterprises to your ADHD, because it just ain't so. This is no gift. But it doesn't mean you don't have other talents that we could use to compensate for it. Whether you're a good athlete, whether you're Michael Phelps, whether you're a good comedian, whether you're Ty Pennington on America's Extreme Home Makeover, who loves to tear down houses since he was a kid, and now he does it for a living, right? All of these are ADHD adults, right? But their giftedness is not due to their ADHD. It was something they found that they did well that could compensate for the problems that their ADHD had caused. So becoming an executive parent, like becoming an executive adult with ADHD, means part of it is I own the disorder. My child has this disorder, because until you own it, you will not advocate for this child. And you have got to get out there and advocate and not let other people take charge of your child. That's why I called my book Taking Charge of ADHD. Because too many times I went to school conferences and I saw parents sit intimidated by the degrees sitting around the table and saying nothing about what was being said in that meeting. And I have to remind parents, these people work for you. You are the taxpayer. This is your child. You should be running this meeting. I want you coming in with a pad and a tape player, and I want you turning it on, and I want you saying to people, I'm not going to be able to take all the notes I want. I'm going to record this meeting. Now, let's talk about my son. Let's start with you. You're his homeroom teacher. What do you think? What's going on here? If you have to, run the damn meeting. And if somebody says something you don't understand, like your child's Whitcock Johnson psychoeducational IQ was, you were going to stop this meeting cold in its tracks. I don't know what you're talking about, all right? Because you're going to see a lot of jargon tossed around by school professionals. Part of it's just showing off. So stop it, right? If you don't understand it, you advocate. And you can't advocate if you don't know what they're talking about. And then the final decisions are always yours, whatever the list of recommendations are, because sometimes the recommendations don't fit your child. This is just a list of recommendations that apply to ADHD plain vanilla, and you may not have plain vanilla. So you're going to have to look at those. You know your child better than anybody else, and you will pick and choose from those the ones you believe are most suitable to your family, to your child, to your values, and so on. But you run the meeting, and you don't sign off on anything that you are not comfortable with. I love parents who come in and give me grief. I do not like parents who come in and sit like a bunch of milquetoast sitting in an office and just listening, and not asking questions and not advocating and not telling me, I don't think that's going to work. His grandparents are not going to buy Concerta. They're going to take us to court for child abuse. You got to help me with that. That's a true story, and that comes from my nephew. So consequently, families need to speak up. How do I know that your grandparents are resistant to medication and that they will make your life miserable if you don't tell me? Okay, now I can tell you how to help the grandparents. But you see, if the parent doesn't talk up, I don't know. I can't help you cope with that. Rule number 2, advocate. Number 3, if you haven't read Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you better. In fact, the better book is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families. Because we have found that more than any other families raising disabled children really need to learn and utilize these. Covey has at the back of the book a diagram that looks like an hourglass that has all 7 principles built into these 2 upside-down triangles. Photocopy it and tape it to your bathroom mirror. When you are putting on your makeup or shaving in the morning, I want those 7 habits in the corner of your visual field. That is your morning reminder to try to get it right. I do that, you should do that. And I didn't raise ADHD children, but these are very good principles for interpersonal relationships, and especially if you have a disabled child. So if you're not familiar with it, these are the 7 principles. You can read more about them. Now, once you have adopted these 3 roles, there is another role I would like you to assume. And this, I think, just paints the whole picture. This is sort of the background canvas on which you paint the rest of this portrait. You need to understand something that parents these days have long since forgot and are going to have to relearn again. Your grandparents knew this, but today's generation of parents doesn't seem to. And that is, you do not get to design your children. Nature would never have permitted that to happen. Evolution would not have allowed a generation of a species to be so influenced by the previous generation. It hasn't happened, and it doesn't happen, and it especially doesn't happen in children. You do not design your children. And yet we have the Mozart effect, the belief that if I play classical music to my uterus when I'm pregnant, I'm going to have a genius. The fact that if I can just put enough crib toys over his crib, he is going to have all these neurons exploding with synapses and be a brilliant mathematician. You don't get that degree of power. Right? Does that mean stimulation doesn't matter? No. It means a stimulation environment is better than a deprived environment. But it doesn't mean that the more stimulation you add into the environment, the better it gets. It's a threshold. There is enough stimulation that every normal brain needs to develop. And once you're past that, which 98% of you are, the rest of it is out of your hands. But this idea that if a little bit is good, a ton of it must be better is a uniquely North American perspective. Right? Believe me, the French don't look as kindly on their children as we do. Right? That's another story for another day. So, what we have learned in the last 20 years of research in neuroimaging, behavior genetics, developmental psychology, neuropsychology can be boiled down to this phrase. Your child is born with more than 400 psychological traits that will emerge as they mature, and they have nothing to do with you. So the idea that you are going to engineer personalities and IQ and academic achievement skills and all these other things just isn't true. Your child is not a blank slate on which you get to write. If you would like to read more about this, please read Steven Pinker's book, The Blank Slate, which is a review of all of this information for parents and why it isn't true. The better view is that your child is a genetic mosaic of your extended family, which means this is a unique combination of the traits that run in your family line. I like the shepherd view. You are a shepherd. You don't design the sheep. The engineering view makes you responsible for everything. Everything that goes right and everything that goes wrong. This is why parents come to us with such guilt, more guilt than we've ever seen in prior generations. Because parents today believe that it's all about them and what they do. And if they don't get it right, or if their child has a disability, they've done something wrong. When in fact the opposite is true. This has nothing to do with your particular brand of parenting. So I would rather that you stop thinking yourself as an engineer and step back and say, I am a shepherd to a unique individual. Shepherds are powerful people. They pick the pastures in which the sheep will graze and develop and grow. They determine whether they're appropriately nourished. They determine whether they're protected from harm. The environment is important, but it doesn't design the sheep. No shepherd is going to turn a sheep into a dog. Ain't going to happen, right? And yet that is what we see parents trying to do all the time, and especially parents of children with disabilities. So step back and view yourself as the shepherd to this disabled youngster, and you get to design the pasture, and that's very important, but you don't engineer the sheep. Now, that comes with it a profoundly freeing view of parenting, because what it means is, although it's important to be a shepherd, recognizing that this is a unique individual before you allows you to enjoy the show, right? So open a bottle of Chardonnay, kick off your slippers, sit back and watch what takes place, right? Because you don't get to determine this, right? So enjoy it. It doesn't last all that long anyway. They're gone before you know it, right? But if you think that what you did in your house is going to shape the life course of this individual, you are sadly mistaken, right? This is a unique individual. Let them grow, let them prosper. Please design appropriate environments around them. But you don't get to design them. As Judy Harris said in 1996, in the first book on this subject written for lay people, the book is called The Nurture Assumption. As she said, you had more to do with your child's life by where you chose to live than by anything you will ever do inside that home. Short of abuse, neglect, or malnutrition, the rest of it is just trivial variation. It's where you live. Why? Because out-of-home influences are more powerful in shaping the life course of your child than in-home influences are. And those out-of-home influences are peer groups, other adults, neighborhoods, resources, schools, and the larger community that you made available to this child. That is how you shape your child's life course. The second biggest influence is also out of your hands, and that's genetics. And you don't get to determine that. But if you think parenting is so influential, let me give you two findings that have been replicated many times. When we follow up twins, we are able to calculate how much of their behavior is due to parenting within family environment. And here's what we find. The peak years of parental influence are below 7. From 7 on to 12, it drops dramatically. After 15, it's 6%. 6% of the variation in a teenager's behavior is how their parents raised them. That's it. And after age 21, it's 0. There is no influence of parenting on any psychological trait after the age of 21. Now, do not mistake what I am saying. The knowledge your child possesses What they know is clearly a function of exposure in the environment. But their traits, their abilities, their makeup, their personality is not. So the idea that somehow we design these kids and we can get rid of ADHD needs to be abandoned. The other research finding is the following, and it has been found in every single study. There is no correlation between any trait of an adopted child and the people who raise them. None. If you think parenting is so powerful, prove it. Otherwise, step back, accept your role as a shepherd, do it well, and enjoy the show. It's going to be a unique set of fireworks, I guarantee you that. But now, not only do you not get the credit, you also don't have to take the blame. You didn't cause this ADHD or whatever other disability your child has. Your child, because of the executive deficit, is going to need to be made more accountable to others. We've already talked about a lot of this, but let's just go back over it in more specifics. First, you need to be much more consistent with your rules and consequences in raising this child than normal parents need to be. And that's not because you're going to engineer the ADHD out of the child. It's because you're going to make this child less disabled from their ADHD by doing that. ADHD is not information deficit disorder, so kindly shut up. Act, don't yak. The more you blather, the more you natter, the more you nag, the less influence you have. So stop thinking that one more sentence will be enough to tip the scales in favor of obedience. It isn't, right? If I can just say it one more time, I know he'll listen. So on the 20th time, there you are, fingers crossed behind your back. Okay. So say it once, then back it up. What these kids listen to more than anything are the immediate consequences, not the nattering, not the nagging, not the moral essays on why you should clean up your room to avoid meningitis. Now, with ADHD children, you've got to get their attention. One of the easiest ways to do it, and also an affectionate way, is to touch them. So I want you to put your hand on their arm, on their hand, or around their shoulder. When you talk to them, I want you to look in their eye, and with that Clint Eastwood look, I want you to keep it short and sweet. What do you want done? What are you trying to say? Or is this positive feedback? Is this approval? Is this recognition? Is this praise? But touch, then talk. Keep it short, keep it sweet, get to the point, and then back it up. All right, if you're a parent with an ADHD child, you better be setting a timer to go off every few minutes and check on where that child is. This is to avoid accidental injury. It is also to catch problems before they occur in order to be a proactive parent. And I'll show you what we call the transition plan in a moment. I want you to increase the frequency of consequences for this child. Your child needs much more external consequences than other people. So there's no need to apologize for it. You're not going to turn them into some little materialistic kid, because he already is anyway. Okay. Okay, here's one. He's got a short attention span. Duh, break the work into small pieces. Stop trying to torture his attention span to become longer than it possibly could ever be. So remember the 30% rule. Reduce the age by 30%. That's his attention span. I have to cut the work into that short a period. So instead of 30 problems all at once, you get 5. Then you do them, bring them up to me. I will take a pair of scissors and snip off the next 5 math problems and give them back to you. This is how you're going to take exams. This is how you're going to do your work. Small chunks, frequent breaks. Not one chunk all at once. By the way, that is better than giving extra time on an exam even to a college student. Extra time on an exam to someone with no sense of time is a dumb idea. You stole that from the learning disabilities because you didn't know what the heck else to ask for. So I guess we'll just ask for extra time. Well, extra time to somebody with this disorder is the definition of hell. You want to know why? Because if you have no sense of time, I want you to remember back to when you were 5 and it was the week before Christmas. What did that feel like, huh? Like molasses, this slow moving. Well, that's what it feels like to somebody with ADHD, and you just gave them an extra hour. Oh, great. They're up, they're out the door before you even know it. I love this extra time recommendation because it's so stupid, right? What you should be doing is called time off the clock. You get a stopwatch. On that stopwatch is going to be the length of time everybody else gets. Start the watch, and any time you like, you can stop it. Stand up, stretch, take a break, ask me a question, come back, start the watch. You will only get the same hour as everybody else, but you get to break it up as often as you like. Will this take extra time? Of course, but that is merely a byproduct of the strategy. Whereas telling somebody they have extra time is not a strategy. This is being done throughout the entire state of Indiana by the Educational Testing Service to prove that it is a more compelling accommodation for taking multiple choice time tests than is the old extra time, which we already know is going to fail anyway. Break the work into pieces. More frequent breaks, the work will get done. You are going to have to use external timers. We've already talked about that. Now, we want you to become proactive, not just in monitoring where your kids are, but also in transitioning across activities, so that when you are making a major change in what your family is doing with this child, I want you to stop. So everything stops. Okay, hold your horses, wait a second. It's homework time. So turn off the TV, stop the action, and then I want you to review 2 or 3 rules this child is to follow in the next activity. Then I want you to set up what is the incentive, what's in it for him, what are you offering? Points, tokens, privileges, extra time on Nintendo or Game Boy or Wii or whatever. What are you offering? Right? Next, what's the punishment? What's he going to lose? Make it clear. You're going to lose that privilege, you're going to lose those points, you're going to lose that time on that computer, or you're going to timeout. Make it obvious. Get the rules up front along with the consequences. Okay. Now, I want you to distribute the consequences throughout the task. You don't wait till it's over. There should be rewards every so often during the task, or they'll never finish. Then I want you to review with them. What do you think? How did you do? How could we do this better? Get their opinion. Invite them to self-evaluate the activity. If you will do that, you will cut your problems by 50%. What do most parents and teachers do? They do reactive parenting. You go about minding your own business, doing your laundry, fixing dinner, until the problem occurs. And now you are a problem-oriented person. All you're doing is reactive firefighting, we call it. Had you just set your plan up front, whether it's before you go into a store or a restaurant, or you start homework, or we go to recess, or we have friends visit, or we go in grandma's house, every one of those is a major transition. You need to stop and do transition planning. Now, what are you going to do when your child is not with you? You're going to get a behavior monitoring card like the kind we use for school, but this can be used anywhere, anytime. It can be used for Cub Scouts, Little League, soccer, hockey, going to a friend's house, spending the afternoon or evening or weekend with grandparents, having a babysitter. Any place this kid is going to be and you're not there, you can monitor it with a monitoring card. In the case of school, you're going to use these rules, and there's enough room for all of his teachers and classes to evaluate him using the rating at the top of the card, 1 through 5. When this card comes home from school, every teacher will have rated this child at the end of every class. We'll have initialed it to ensure against forgeries because they will forge this card. Okay. So let's anticipate that. All right, and then the parents are going to review the card, and the points are in parentheses. That's how many points you earn, and in the case of 4s and 5s, which are lousy ratings, that's how many points you lose. You are then going to add up the points, subtract the negatives. That's what you got to spend in your home on your little token system, on your reward chart. But you could do this for anything. It could be for bus rides, it could be for lunchroom, it can be for recess, it can be for scouts. I don't care. If he is away from you and there's another adult there, that other adult can be evaluating your child frequently. Whether it's every 15 minutes, whether it's at the end of every 45-minute class period, as it is in school, doesn't matter. Frequent evaluation comes back to you. You deliver the full consequences based on that card. And here again, you can start to cut down problems by increasing accountability, even in places where you can.